Let's learn how to get your environments to stay the same across multiple shots. And if you stay until the end of the video, I will show you how to create fully 3D scenes like these ones with zero modeling or texturing experience. I have divided the video in 3 different priorities. Simple but similar enough backgrounds, consistent 360 spaces, and hero environments with full control. For the first one, we will focus on getting the backgrounds similar enough to each other so that the viewer understands they are in the same place, mainly working on the colors, the ambience, and the shapes or scale. The lighting is also important, even though you could change it if you wanted to. You might get lucky and moving from a establishing shot to closer takes will be as simple as just prompting for the same type of environment. But in some cases, one or multiple factors will be too different from the original image, confusing the viewer. In this particular example, the main issues are the shapes, the scale, and the ambience. To fix this, we will use ControlNet, and if you care enough, Inpainting. The first ControlNet model I'm gonna use is actually Sketch. And this is just optional, but it is a very helpful trick that will most likely save us a lot of time on this example. With just a 30-second drawing, we are solving the dome shape issue, the scale issue, and we are also erasing a lot of randomness from the equation. No need to know how to actually draw either. For the other most common ControlNet model, we can use both reference only or IP adapter. Each one has its own strengths, but the best advice I can give you is that if one isn't working, just use the other one and test parameters out. I will choose IP adapter in this case, and let's click generate with all our ControlNet parameters on default. We can see that the IP adapter is working too well, and it is trying to add multiple domes even if we asked for just one. To avoid this, let's lower its weight and ending ControlNet step. I will also start it at 10% steps to give time for the composition to form just one glass dome and then make IP adapter work more on the colors instead. If you want, you can go to Inpaint and improve some parts, like so. The idea is to change stuff that could potentially confuse the viewer. For example, here I'm trying to go inside this castle. Using reference only and a very simple sketch, I was able to get the shot I wanted. But there's a different castle on the distance. This might make the viewer doubt where they are, so I will take it out. I feel like reference only is very good with ambience and colors, while IP adapter focuses more on concepts, where for the forest example, it tried to create giant trees. I am not sure though, maybe I'm just wrong. In the case none of them give you good enough results, you can also try to use image to image. Just import your initial image and prompt. No need for ControlNet here, even though you can try with it too. Now just use a denoising strength of 0.85 or so if you use Keras, or a bit lower for Euler. And that's it. Pretty simple. Before moving to the harder part, here are 2 quick tricks that will help you in case you are still struggling to get similar backgrounds. First, you can generate one long panoramic image that is composed by 2 different shots, and that way the environment will be a bit more consistent. And second, if you feel like the colors in your scene aren't quite matching with the original image, like here, you can go to Photoshop, import both images, and now select the layer with the image you want to fix. Then under Image, Adjustments, click Match Color. For Source, you're going to select the image to change, and in Layer, you will select the reference image. Now just play around with the settings and you will have a much better result. Alright, enough with tricks, let's get to the real consistency. The next step is pretty nice for those of you who just want a reusable environment, but it is also a crucial part of the 3D environment we will get into later on. So, pay attention. We will be creating 360 images directly from Stable Diffusion. If you are using SD 1.5, you can download this 360 Panorama LoRa by Dobro Sketchkun, or download the 360 Dreadmon LoRa by Artificial Guy PR. I will, however, recommend that you install 2 extensions, Asymmetric Tiling and Panorama Viewer, which will allow us to quickly test our 360 images. To understand this better, these are basically images that can turn into a sphere. Tiling it in the x-axis will make it so that there isn't a noticeable seam anywhere, so make sure to activate the asymmetric tiling on X when you do this. If you don't want it to negatively affect the rest of your image, you can try to start the tiling process later on. Let's try this with just a random prompt. Add the LoRa, the keywords, and now I'll just prompt for something like raw photo of a white sand desert, starry sky, giant magical temple. For SDXL, we use 1600 by 800. while for SD 1.5, I'll use 512 by 1024. Now hit Generate. Once it's done, you can go to your Panorama Tools extension and click From Text to Image. I'll change the aspect ratio down here too, and now we can see that this works pretty well already. Same goes for interiors, of course, like let's say a gamer room. This isn't perfect though. Most of the time the room won't make much logical sense, like room with 2 TVs and 2 fireplaces, or rooms with just sofas. Also, some rooms might not give you enough space to actually place the characters in them. To fix this, we will use ControlNet. The fastest way is to create a canvas and sketch what we want to see, keeping in mind the lens distortion and the tiling from one side to the other. If I draw 4 walls pretty far away, at least that will get followed by the generation, even if needing to use a low ending step. It's a pretty good option for environments, where we paint some rough shapes of what we want, and it helps with the composition. You can also paint them inside the Panorama Tools extension, by the way. But it is still pretty hard to control and get accurately, and you can end up with the same issues that you were having before. Which is why I prefer the second ControlNet method, depth. Using depth maps you can control as much as you want, like in this example, where I used depth and segmentation to create this 360 image of a house. Just to choose for it to make no sense anyway. Why did I put the kitchen in front of the bed? Why is there even a bed in here? Problem is, how do we make this? Don't worry, I will go over it when we get to the 3D part, but for now, I made a small depth map library for different scenarios. I also left a segmentation model just in case, as well as the 3D model itself, so that you can modify it if you want. You will of course have it for free in the description. Remember that with depth, white means close to the camera, and dark means away from it. When you use this, make sure you input a low weight and ending step. That way you let AI have more freedom over the details. For this example, I will use 0.6 weight and 0.4 ending step. These are the result with the same depth map and 2 different prompts. And for 3D rooms, we follow the same idea, low weight and ending step until satisfied. If you export your own depth maps, you will have full control over the positioning of stuff, allowing for higher values. After you get a result that you like, you can bring the image into Inpainting and either add or remove stuff, pretty much like you would do in a regular image. But in most cases, keeping the depth map and LORA so that the image maintains the correct lens distortion. That's how I got this interior I've shown multiple times now. You can also inpaint just to add detail and repair weird looking stuff. This is a technique from the master himself, Darkstorm, a wise one on our Discord server, who actually helped in this image too. After you have upscaled the image and have enough resolution, you will get it into Inpainting. We will also import the same image into ControlNet with ControlNet Tile. Make sure that you activate Crop Input Image based on Automatic 1111's mask. The idea here is to use a decently high weight, like 0.8, but a low ending step. In my case, I'll use 0.55. This will allow us to use a denoising strength of 0.9 to 1. Also, make sure to use only masked and low padding pixels. 30 to 50 is good. Keras helps with the image not changing too much too. I personally use 1024 by 1024 as a resolution here. Now just mask the part you want to fix and prompt for what you want in it, like a cupboard with books. Finally, hit Generate. This will create a version of what we had that is still similar but with more details. Just repeat this process for every single thing you want. Remember that this is my version of the method, so don't be afraid to play with the parameters. Darkstorm gets even better results with his secret formula. Before I move to the next topic, some of you might want to get anime environments, but realize that the LORAS I said have a pretty strong bleeding towards realism. You could either text to image with just a ControlNet model and no LORA, or Animefy your results like in these cases. To do this, we will use image to image and tile just like before, but this time with our anime model of choice and prompting for an anime illustration, without the LORA. We will use a high denoise strength from 0.9 to 1. Then, for the tile model, you can play around with it, but I'd go even lower than before. That should do it. Now that we have some options to consistently create 2D environments, let's move on to creating 3D ones. For this, we will need to install Blender, a free 3D software. The installation is super simple, and it doesn't occupy much space. We will use Blender to do the following: exporting your own depth maps to make custom 360 images. Using these 360 images to texture a simple 3D environment, which we will then populate with fully AI-generated assets. and using Stable Diffusion images and depth maps to create more complex terrains, combining them with 360 images and assets to achieve results like these. When you open Blender, you will see this. Let's quickly go over the very basics so that you can follow the tutorial. To move around in the scene, we will use the middle mouse button. Maintaining it click and moving the mouse will make us rotate around. Maintaining Shift plus the middle mouse will allow us to pan around, and just scrolling forward and backward will get us closer or further away. With left click, select the objects you see on the scene. You could also select them up here in the outliner. To move the object around, we will use these buttons on the left. This one is to select, this other one is to move the object, below that you can rotate the object, and this one is to scale it. The colored lines constrain the transformation to that axis. Here where you see Object Mode, you can select a lot of stuff. We will only use Edit Mode, which will allow us to select parts of the object. For example, hitting this button here will make us able to select the faces, and move them around individually. If you make a mistake, you can always hit Ctrl Z. Then we also have these buttons on the right here, and these on top. It's a lot of info to take at once, don't worry too much about it. I had not touched Blender before pretty much in ever, so I won't be doing nothing that you can't follow. Just pay attention to where I click. I will also say what I do as I go. Okay, let's modify the cube to get something that looks like a room, so that we can create a depth map for it. I will scale it a bit, like so. Now we want the camera, this here, to be inside the room. So select it and go over this button right here. This will show you the object position, rotation, scale, etc. I will put it at 0, 0, 0, so it's inside our cube. Same with our rotation. We don't want it to be looking down though, so I'll rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis. And now it looks to the front of the room. If you want to see what the camera is seeing, you can click 0 on your numpad or go to View, Viewport, Camera. The main issue here is that the camera is not yet a 360 camera, so let's fix that. And as we do, let's also fix some other important stuff that we will need. We will do this with the buttons on the right, starting with Render, where we will select Cycles, and I will use my GPU to render. Then, under Output, we will render an image of 2160 by 1080, and we will use an output of RGB 16. On View Layer, we will activate Z, which is basically the depth map. Finally, with the camera selected, we will go under here in Camera and change from Perspective to Panoramic and from Fisheye to Equirectangular. But you won't see this as a panoramic camera unless you activate the render view, which you do by clicking this button up here. Whoops, there's an issue though. The cube is made to be seen from the outside and not from the inside, and it also doesn't have any light in it. If we go outside the cube, we can select the light and place it inside it, just as we did with the camera. I'll move the light to 0, 0, 0. You can't see it now, of course. I will switch to solid mode for this, up here. To flip the cube inside out, we will need to go on Object Mode and change it to Edit Mode. Select the faces, and in case you don't have everything selected, click A. This will select all the faces. Now go to Mesh, Normals, and Flip. With this all done, switching back to Render Mode and hitting 0 to use the camera view, we can see that we finally have our 360 image. This isn't a depth map though. We will need to open the Compositing tab for that. Click on Use Nodes and these two nodes will appear. We will add 4 other nodes. With Shift A you can search for them and add them. We will add a Viewer, a Gamma, an Invert Color, and a Range. Next we will connect the depth map to Range value, then Range connected with Image on Gamma, and from Gamma to Color on Invert Color. Finally, Color with Image on the Viewer node. If you don't have any image here, click the Render button first. If you can't see anything, activate the backdrop. On the Invert Color, activate Alpha and deactivate RGB. Also, deactivate Use Alpha on the Viewer node. Up the Gamma a bit and you'll be able to see our depth map. Playing with the parameters on this node, you'll be able to get a good looking depth map. With shift click and drag, you'll go slower and have more precision. I like it at 6 or so in this case. We are almost done with the boring part, I promise. Let's quickly export the depth map. Go to the Rendering tab and select, by clicking this image icon, Viewer node. Now just save the image going to Image and Save. Don't worry if you feel like you got lost. In the library I mentioned before, I will also leave a Blender scene as an example that you can use or just check how it is done. Back in Stable Diffusion, I'll do as we did for the other 360 images, but this time I will use a higher control net depth value, since I actually need to maintain the shapes better, and I don't want any furniture or assets inside the scene. I just want the walls, floor and ceiling. I will prompt for the interior of a cyberpunk restaurant with views to a city, and you can of course fix anything you don't like. Don't worry, I'll go over how to do exteriors later, but for now let's use this as a texture. Back to Blender, we will go to the shading tab up here. You should have a material here, and if not, just select the cube and hit New. Go to Edit and Preferences, here on Add-ons, and look for Node, then activate Node Wrangler. Now go back to the Node tab and we will add some new nodes. With Shift A and looking for geometry, add this one, Shift A again and add a mix shader, and we will also add a transparent, not to confuse with translucent. Finally, I will also add an environment texture. By clicking Open on this node, you can select the image you generated. I have it in the Stable Diffusion outputs. If you connect this image node to your principled BSDF node, you will see it. We can see it, but we can't see it inside of the cube. So let's fix that by connecting the other 3 nodes we added. Connect them like so, and then connect the mix shader to the material output. Now we can see the cube from outside correctly, but I can see that the walls aren't as I would expect them to be. To make the image correctly follow the cube, we will click on your environment texture node. And if you activated the add-on I set, hitting Ctrl T will show you these 2 new nodes. From texture coordinate, connect object instead of generated. And now we need to play around with the mapping. In this case, I see that the main issue is the scale. Play with the numbers until you fix it. You can of course also rotate the image and move it up or down with these other settings. Another way to get it to fit even better is by moving aside the walls. For this, go to Edit Mode, select Faces, and move the faces a bit until the image is properly attached. A bit of deformation is always expected though. And done! We are now finally ready for the fun part. Populating this with AI-generated assets. For this, we will go to LUMALABS.AI. And no, I'm not sponsored, I wish. Just go to Imagine and write what you want. You will have 4 3D asset variations to download almost instantly. I do think they will make this a paid subscription soon enough, not gonna lie. As a 3D modeler that mainly makes assets, I'm so hyped for this. Since I'll be making a restaurant, I will prompt for a modern cyberpunk restaurant table. And here you go. There is actually 2 that I like. Just click on them and now we choose a format. I recommend OBJ or FBX. You can repeat this process to get all the assets that you need. Different tables, chairs, decoration, even a house if you wanted to. I will also leave the assets that I downloaded in the description for you. This will download you a zip file. Let's unzip it, and we will see that it comes with a texture maps too. Blender, go to File, Import and OBJ. Then select the object you want to import. Once inside here, we will scale it with S and move it around to place it where we want. If you want more than one copy, click Shift plus D, and if you click the middle mouse button, you can move it in one fixed axis. If you don't want to be rendering all the time, go to Solid, View, and activate Backface Culling under this arrow right here. This is a pretty fun process, just import your assets and place them until you like how it looks. I also touch a bit of the illumination in the process, but this will be part of the next videos. After a few retouches, you can have a very quick and easy interior scene. You can spend as much time on it as you need. And for exteriors is more of the same. Even though you will need to use a modified sphere, you can create one, but I will leave a base scene that you can use directly with the rest of the library. Just change the image you'll be using on this node, and maybe touch the sun's color or strength. Of course, some images will work better than others, but playing with the scale might help a bit. If you are interested in doing this step by step, in the description I will leave the tutorial I learned this from. And if you want a more complex terrain that isn't just a flat floor, another option you have here is using depth as displacement. This is fairly easy to do. Let's see what I mean. In Blender, I'll delete this cube and add a basic plane. Then, in Edit mode, I'll subdivide it with right-click. Under here, I'll add 100 subdivisions. This will make it so we have a lot of vertices in the plane. And with a depth map, we will tell these vertices to go up on the white values and down on the dark values. So let's create a depth map to do this. I will go into Stable Diffusion. Keep in mind that this can work with anything, but if you don't want your textures to feel super stretched, I'd do this with images that are from above only. That's why I downloaded this drone shot LORA by Dr. Diffusion. Let's say you wanted to create a moon-like surface with some craters and such. I'll prompt for that using the LORA until I find a result I like. Then I drag the result into ControlNet and use depth preprocessors for the image. You can try the ones that you like the most, but I think Depth Anything or Zoe are the best by far. After this is done, download the pre-processed image. Now go back to Blender, select your plane and, on the right, click the Modifiers button. Here we will add a new one called Displace. Click on New, and now you'll need to go under Texture and open the depth map we downloaded. This will apply this depth map and move the vertices on the plane accordingly. You can modify the strength of this map with the modifier, of course. And if you think some part of it is not right or want to change it, you can do so with Photoshop by painting with a scale of gray. Then reload the image. Lastly, go to Shading and create a texture for the plane. With Shift A, you can add an image texture, which will be our generated image color. And there you go. You can do this with multiple other things, of course. A frozen waterfall, cliffs. You could even make tileable stuff with this. For my example, I chose this image. Then I outpainted it to have some more room and inpainted to add details as well as to change some parts of it. And this is how it looks on Blender after the depth map. And now it's a matter of adding different assets to the scene, taking all the time you need. After you finish adding the assets you wanted, we will create a 360 image to act as the background and to add a bit of lighting to the scene. Let's go over to Stable Diffusion. Using IP adapter with the original image as reference, we will generate the new image. In Blender, we will go to Shading, and up here where it says Object, we will change to World. Now add an environment texture with our generated image. If you don't like it, you can go and change whatever you like. And there you go. You should probably upscale it too so it doesn't look so bad. That's pretty much it for now. If you want to render stuff out, it's as easy as using the camera that the scene already has. Make sure it's not on 360 image mode though. And check that you have some lights. To move the camera to your viewpoint, you can press Ctrl-Alt+0 on the numeric pad, or go to View, Align Active Camera to View. Now go up here, Render, and Render Image. You can save this with Image and Save Image once the render has finished. To make it end faster, just lower the samples here on Render. Something like 100 is more than enough for this. You can of course use this later in Stable Diffusion to give it a more cohesive look by going to image and using a low denoising strength like 0.4 or so. I think 3D has way much more potential than just this though, and I will probably be diving deeper into it in the future. Next video, we will talk about how to add characters to this environment, as well as how to make them interact with it, and how to make everything fit. Thank you so much for watching, join the Discord, and see ya!